Hello, Filighters. This is your host, Lambo, and we have a special guest today. As you can see, Jillian Johnsrud, author of Retire Off and How Anyone Can Take Multiple Career Breaks to Unlock Adventure, Advance Their Career, and Find Financial Freedom. Retire Often will be released on September 9th, 2025, for those of you listening later. Literally less than a week after we record this episode, 2 days before FinCon 25 starts, where Jillian will be a big idea speaker at that conference up in Portland, Oregon. What's not like about somebody that has retire often as a motto? Today I'm wearing kind of one of my retirement / vacation adventure shirts in her honor, because she takes a lot of mini retirements and has done so and has written about it. She coaches others. She's a mom. She's a speaker. She's a podcaster. She has done a lot of things. But today we're going to talk primarily about her new book, Retire Often, that's coming out shortly. Several years ago, I heard her on a Choose Fi podcast episode, and I've heard her many times since then. She's always got something great to add, and there is an actionable item in any time she speaks. So please join me in welcoming Jillian here to the Filighter podcast. And Jillian, with that, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've kind of been in this financial independence orbit.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Um, so I started kind of getting my money life together when I was about 19 and became financially independent when I was 32. I'm 42 now. And I actually, that year that me and my spouse at the time became financially independent, we decided to take a year off. And during that year off, I was like, I think I want to do something with writing. Like I'd always enjoyed writing as a hobby, but we had 5 little kids, so I didn't have a tremendous amount of time for that. And so I started blogging that year off. And so it's been almost 10 years that I've been writing online, and I've been writing this book for 3 years. And it was really born out of about 8 years ago, I started doing one-on-one coaching. And then I started doing group coaching and just walking so many people through this process. Like, how do we plan these mini retirements? How do we negotiate the time off? How do we save the money? How do we budget for it? And then how do we handle when things maybe don't go exactly as we expect, like those unexpected challenges or unexpected opportunities? And so the book, it was actually really simple to write in that I've had thousands of conversations and I just had to like take the ones that I had the most frequently and put them all together.
Wow, yeah, it must be hard when you have that much content with all the coaching experience you've got,
Yeah.
where you've seen a lot of different things, and it's
Yeah.
like each one of them probably has a valuable lesson attached to it. So
Hmm.
you kind of have to decide what goes in the book, right?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I'm retired now. I'm 62, so I've got 20 years on you. But I will say that in that 40 to 55 range in my career,
Hmm.
I kind of felt like I just needed a sabbatical.
Yeah.
I was working in a corporate environment, a global organization, multiple time zones, and even though you weren't at work, I
Yeah.
sat at this desk and had a lot of 9 p.m. calls with China and
Yep.
Singapore, and Indonesia and, Dubai. It was like always in your head. And,
Yeah.
and that go, 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 work, 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 try to spend time with family and not worry about something. And, I guess it caused a little burnout, and that's what was
Hmm.
kind of giving me rise to that feeling of I just need a break. I need a
Yeah.
recharge zone. Is burnout still a really big deal? What is that, and how does it impact people?
It's huge. I think the latest stat I saw was like 89% of Americans have experienced burnout in the last 12 months. Like it's so prevalent. And I sometimes it's hard to identify what those symptoms are if you don't know how to identify them. So I usually look at how is your motivation? Like how excited are you about something? How enthused are you? Like, how much juice do you have in the tank of like, oh my gosh, I'm really looking forward to this project. Like, how much creativity do you feel? How much like gumption? Because those are some of the first things that start to fall away. Is you can do the thing, you don't want to do the thing. Like you can get through the thing, but you're not like, what if we do this and these eight other things? Like what if we make it bigger and better? And that kind of energy is what diminishes as we get burned out. And the further and further and further in you get to it, the more you get into almost like a survival mode of like, I just have to keep my head above water. I just have to keep one foot moving in front of another. Like, don't distract me with creative ideas. Don't distract me with like extra features or extra products. Like, I'm just like, you have to have this almost tunnel vision. And as burnout starts to recover, I almost, especially for people who have really demanding jobs or entrepreneurs, it almost feels like they're aging in reverse and not even so much physically aging, but like that emotional enthusiasm aging. If they're like a really burned out 50, all of a sudden they have like more of that like 40-year-old energy of like, yeah, we should tackle this. Like, yeah, we should do this. And then the more they recover, then they have like that 30-year-old energy of like, oh, this would be a great idea. Well, what if we actually went even bigger on this? And the more you recover, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I can bring the enthusiasm and that optimism and that creativity that I had at 22. I used to when I was a kid, I remember thinking, gosh, people in their 40s are really boring. Like they just like they don't have any excitement or creativity or enthusiasm. Like they don't dream these
Yeah.
big
They
audacious
lost,
dreams anymore.
yeah, they
Like,
lost the spark in life, It's like, what happened?
yeah. And then I
Oh,
realized when I got to my 40s, I was like, oh, they're just tired. Just so
yes, yes.
tired. It's not that they're boring, they're just tired.
So, as a parent of three and now a grandparent of one that's almost a year old, when we watch our grandson, it's like parenting is hard work, and it's
Yeah.
24/7. It's like you can't take your eye off of him because he gets away.
Yeah.
And anyway, but I remember just those years, and we were in a situation where um, my wife could step out of the full-time role and into kind of
Mhm.
more of a part-time remote role when the kids were young, and but it's still a lot of work and it's draining. But you know, I I was thinking a little bit about the whole concept. When you talk about these mini retirements, and we're going to get back into that deeper. But you know, I mentioned I'm 62, you're 42. I just really feel like 35 years ago when I was 35 or 40 working in the corporate environment, that a lot of the ideas in this book, I just read them and I'm like, that would not fly. That's a non-starter. I had a Navy Academy boss, and you mentioned in the burnout thing, he would have these one-on-one meetings with us, and he had that everybody had their own steno notebook pad in his file that he gets out. He's got the list and he sets it down, and he starts having your monthly review on
Yeah.
where do we stand on this, where do we stand on this, where do we stand. And it's you have a comment in the book about what would it be like if you had a boss that had 10 priorities and they were all priority one projects for you,
Mhm.
right? I said, yeah, that's Walt.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
peers that are going to listen to this will say, that was Walt. But what I
Yeah.
finally learned is like the right things had to be getting done.
Yeah.
And as long as they were moving forward, he didn't really beat you to death on the others, but he always had the load on your back, right?
Yeah.
You always thought about it. And that just kept going. But millennials, I did a little research, poked around on the internet yesterday. I said, so, okay, millennials are 29 to 44 years old right now.
Yeah.
And I thought, they're kind of in middle level, upper level management jobs.
Mhm.
Are they starting to exercise their perspective and actually change corporate policies on this kind of stuff? Have you had any experience with that might be real?
Yeah, I think the perception of taking time off is very different than, I interviewed our mutual friend, JL Collins, who took multiple mini retirements throughout his career. And he worked in the publishing industry in the 70s and the 80s, like in the 90s, like very corporate culture. And he was like, yeah, nobody did this. It was so weird. I was such an outlier. And he's like, but I pulled it off. Like it worked. But it was not common at all. And now I think the perception is shifting a little bit on a few fronts. One, we realize, like you said, like this overwhelming sense of responsibility, this overwhelming sense of like always having meetings, always having to be on. We realize, especially with email and technology, that's not really going away. So we can like push back against it for better work life balance. But the reality is, it's not going to be the 90s again. Like, we're not going to roll back in time to where like
No,
no one had a cell phone and no one had the internet. And like once you were home, you
technology's
were just unavoilable. Like, if you went out to
it's
dinner, no one could reach you, were unreachable. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I remember we traveling, you would give your family member the name and the number of the hotel because that was the only way anyone could get a hold of you, was call the hotel.
You'd print out
So,
MapQuest before you left,
yes.
right? So you knew where to turn. And you mentioned J.L. Collins. I think it'd be great to just comment on this. That he wrote the foreword to your book, and
Hmm.
it is excellent. I kind of felt
Yeah.
right in line with some of the comments he
Yeah.
makes in the forward because I kind of lived my career more so on his type of career than
Hmm.
yours maybe, and so many things. If you think about it in a different way in terms of what if we did step away,
Yeah.
and how would I do this? And we'll get into later. You put a lot of great examples in the book that really help people visualize
Hmm.
what does that email need to say when I say, "Hey,
Yeah.
boss, let's have a chat." And oh, by
Yep.
the way, I'm leaving for a
Yeah.
while, but I'll be
Yeah.
back, and you need me, and it's cheaper, and I
Yes.
want a raise. Give it
Yeah.
all to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like I said, we're not going back to the 90s. So I think people are starting to say, okay, so how else can we deal with this? Else can we navigate this burnout? Because work is going to be a little all encompassing and it's going to be kind of constant. You're always going to be thinking about it. Um, and so companies have tried a few things. Like they tried like unlimited PTO. Some of them have tried like a 4-day work week. We're trying to figure this out. But I think that a month off, a mini retirement, is the most effective tool to create that work life balance. Because even if you have Fridays off, which is amazing and lovely, you're still thinking about, like, you're not disconnected. You're not forgetting all of the projects that are happening. And it's why I recommend a month as kind of the minimum effective dose for a mini retirement, because it's usually about week 2 that people really start to settle in. They kind of forget what's happening at work. They kind of forget all of the tasks that they left incomplete. They kind of forget where things are at and they start to be more present in their body. They start to feel more relaxed. They start to feel more present with the activities they're doing and the people around them, and they like can fully engage. So to get just a couple weeks of that deep state of rest is really transformative and helpful.
Yeah, you have a term called, I think it's active rest that we'll talk more
Hmm.
about. I want to hear more about that. But I thought about that second week, and you're having your tea on the beach or your
Yeah.
second cup of coffee. It's 9 o'clock, and you know what? They're having a sales meeting, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
starting to experience the joy a little bit
Yeah.
of not being in the go weekly accountability discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that shifting, like how can we create work-life balance in a way that actually works, is a conversation, but also the perception of what does it mean to take a break? What does that say about you as a person? Because I think in that old school, the 60s, 70s, 80s mentality, it was like you're just going to work 40 years straight, maybe for the same company, and you're going to work, 50 weeks a year, year after year after year. And that kind of worked in that economy, that kind of worked with, if there was no email and no internet, like you could have a really happy life that way. And it's not working. So I think that that slightly more old school mentality is like, if you take a break, you're weak. If you take a break, you're lazy. If you take a break, you're unmotivated or undisciplined or
Yeah.
flaky. Like all of those old ideas.
Something's got to be wrong. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're
Uh,
enjoying your life, you're
yeah.
obviously doing it incorrectly. But I think more people are starting to realize, gosh, actually, to take a break, to take a month off, it takes a tremendous amount of courage. It takes a tremendous amount of foresight. It takes creativity to even imagine doing something different. You have to be really disciplined. You have to be really organized. Like, it's not an easy thing to pull off. And people who do that, like, they care about their performance. In the book, I talk about playing high school basketball in high school.
Yeah.
Everyone takes a halftime in high school.
Halftime.
In every sport, you take the halftime,
You
not because
you
you don't care
rest.
about the game.
Yeah. You find your
Yeah.
bearings. You say, what are we going to
Yes.
adjust?
Yeah, you take it because you care about the outcome so much. You take it because you're so dedicated to your performance as an athlete that you're going to do everything you can to show up as your very best. And you need the physical rest, you need the mental rest, you need to reimagine how the second half of this game is going to play out. And you can't do that by just working all the way through. Like working more doesn't necessarily make you a better performer. It probably makes you a worse performer.
Yes, when you burn the midnight oil, you're definitely not
Mhm.
working at peak efficiency, and
No.
and if you've worked 7 to 8 days straight on some project, you're definitely not doing your best work.
Yeah.
Hey, well, let's kind of dive into the book now
Yeah.
and talk a little more specifically about some of the stuff. You know, you break the book into four major steps for mini
Yep.
retirements. Can you kind of recap what are the big picture four major steps?
Yeah, the first one is planning what this adventure is going to be. Like what feels important right now, what feels timely, what feels meaningful, what makes sense financially of like which thing on your bucket list you should do first. And I start with that because the next two steps are kind of a pain in the butt. Um
Yeah,
And you need to
yeah.
have that vision ahead of you of how this is going to be amazing, of what the benefit's going to be. Like, you need to find the carrot before we deal with the stick.
Drive that
So,
motivation because the
yes,
other steps are going to take a little work. Yeah.
they're going to take some
No.
courage and you're going to have to get
Yeah.
some gumption. And like, you're going to like feel that
Yeah.
internal resistance. So, like, start with the big picture, start with like the dessert at the end.
Yeah.
Um, and then the second step I talk about is the career stuff, how to negotiate this off, how to explain this career break, finding your next job, the networking, all of those things, career. And then the third one is the financial. How do we budget for it? How do we plan for it? And then eventually, if you do want to retire often, like if you want to take multiple mini retirements, how do we look at our investments and our buckets of money in a way that would facilitate this long term? And then the fourth one is like, I kind of compare it to Lewis and Clark. When they set out on the expedition
Yeah.
to explore the western part of the United States, it was unexplored to them. Like it was unmapped to them, but other people lived there.
They weren't
Other people,
first.
like other people had experienced that landscape and the
Sacagawea.
hunting and the passages. Like, so while, and I kind of view my role in the book as like the Sacagawea. Like,
Yeah.
I know you've never done a mini retirement, and I know your friends and your family haven't done this, so it feels all new and weird and unfamiliar. But there's a couple of us that have gone
Yeah.
through this a few times, and like we can kind of show you the ropes. Like, here are the places you want to avoid. Like, you want to get through this pass,
Yeah.
by November, or else you're going to get snowed in the mountains. Like, we can give you a few tips.
Well, I haven't taken any mini retirements, but I will say I did retire early. And it's
Yeah.
like you have to look around for the people that have done the thing most people are not doing,
Yes.
and I read a lot, I do a lot of things to try to learn more about that experience and realize that you're not alone, you're not first, you're not unique. Well,
Yeah.
you may be unique. Everybody's unique in some ways, but in a lot of ways, there's a way to do this. So let's talk a little bit. I thought it was really neat when you in the first step you talk about the visions of you know kind of what is your list of mini retirements? I'll call it
Yeah.
a bucket list, or
Yeah.
if you were going to take a month off every other year or something like
Yeah.
that, what would they look like? Would
Yeah.
you be traveling? Would you be hiking sections of the Appalachian Trail, which is one of my
Mhm.
personal goals still? Um, and then you kind of look at that through two prisms. One is the
Mhm.
physical, your
Yeah.
physical capability, okay, and
Mhm.
we talk a lot in terms of retirement phases of go go, slow go, and no go. But in this
Yeah.
case, let's just say all your mini retirements are more go go than slow go, and then
Yeah.
maybe they turn into slow go. So there's one prism on what you're physically capable of doing
Yep.
on these adventures, or whatever they become. And the other one is the prism of the financial impact, where
Mhm.
you kind of, maybe earlier in your career, you don't have as much money set aside financially to do things that are very expensive,
Yep.
but you might later.
Yep.
So those two prisms, you have a neat graphic. Can you kind of talk about those two balances?
Yeah. I think, I encourage people, like, yeah, if you've got 20 items on your bucket list, let's look at which ones take not, and it's not just the most physical capability. For a lot of people, it's preference. And especially when I talk to people like in their late 20s, early 30s, they're like, I'm going to the gym and I'm lifting weights and I'm like working on my VO2 max. Like, I'm going to be in amazing shape forever. And I'm like, that's awesome. Keep doing that. And your preferences might change. So, like, I did a road trip. I did a mini retirement coast to coast, DC to Seattle and back in my Honda Civic. And I think I was 23 with my best friend, and it was amazing. But like, we slept on people's couches, and like, we slept in a tent on the frozen ground, and we almost got trampled by bison. Like, it was so fun. And now at 42, I don't sleep on the frozen ground anymore. Like, I don't want to sleep in the middle of a herd of
Yeah.
bison. Like, I'm so glad I did it, and it was amazing. We ate candy for breakfast every day. It was
You made memories on that trip.
I require vegetables now. I require
Yeah.
vegetables every day of my life. And so I'm so glad I did that. And it was so fun. But that season of life, my preferences are different. They've changed. And so think about, if you want to like backpack through Thailand and sleep in youth hostels, like you might love that at 25 and you might love that at 35. At 55, you're like, my own hotel room sounds awesome, actually, like
Yeah. Yeah.
private sleeping quarters. And so, kind of front load the things that maybe your preferences will change over time, like how you travel, your types of accommodations, the activities that sound interesting to you might change over time. And so, think about that just and it's a best guess, but like in the decades of your life, slot which ones maybe fit where the best. And then the
Right.
other side is the financial. If you're earlier in your financial journey, front load the affordable stuff. Partly because like it will massively impact your financial trajectory, like it makes a big difference financially. But also, I encourage people to scale their mini retirement budget with their current income. So if you're only making 2,500 bucks a month, pick an affordable mini retirement partly because like that's the lifestyle you're used to. If you're making
Right.
2,500 bucks a month, like you don't mind sleeping on like your mom's like, in their guest room or your great
Yeah.
aunt's guest room. You're like, yeah, that's totally my style. Where maybe later in your career, if you're bringing home 10,000 a month or 20,000 a month, your taste and your preferences might be different. So you're like, I don't sleep on frozen ground anymore. I don't sleep in my car anymore.
Yeah.
I know a
Not
lot of
only do
people
I
who like
get a
travel
hotel
and sleep in
room,
their car, and I'm like,
but
no.
but yeah, the type of bed even matters now. So it's like
Yes.
you get, first thing we do when we get to an Airbnb is we start looking at the beds. It's like, it doesn't matter what this room looks like. We're not here to be
Yeah.
in the room, okay? It matters if we can recharge at night on this bed or not, and get some rest. So,
Yep.
you have a quote. I was going to read it. Give yourself enough time, and the simple pleasures of life will naturally make your trip more affordable. You know,
Yeah.
I I love that comment because sometimes, another concept you bring up is slow travel, and I want to hear more
Yeah.
about that because that's something I'm very interested in. But
Yeah.
I do find that when you don't have a hard deadline to finish something, and we were camping on an RV on the White River in Arkansas once with
Mm.
the kids when they were little, and one of the places we had mapped out to go, we were supposed to ride horses, and the horse guy retired, and they didn't have any horses, and they
Oh,
had a lot of mosquitoes. It was
yeah.
somewhere outside of Memphis. Yeah, anyway, and we were able to add an extra day at the best place we stayed,
Yeah.
right on the banks of the White River. People wading, fishing, fly fishing, and we did a little
Mhm.
canoe ride down the river, and made some memories. But if you slow down, sometimes, just sitting there making coffee on the picnic table,
Yeah.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
And watching the mist over the water,
Mhm.
and you can almost paint a picture if you're willing to just be still for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about kind of this time luxury continuum
Right.
where if you don't have a lot of time, oftentimes we want more luxury. If you only get 4 days in Paris, like you kind of got to make it count. If you're going to fly there and you spend all the money on plane tickets, like you might as well like stay at a nice place and eat at nice places and like make it nice cuz you only have 4 days. Where if you're going to be in Paris for a month, then it doesn't have to be action packed. Like you can go down to the cafe and you can like drink a cappuccino and you can sit there and read your book for 2 or 3 hours and it's like so lovely and you can stroll around a park and take in one museum because you have the time, you don't necessarily need the luxury because time is kind of its own luxury. So that's one mistake people often make with thinking about, gosh, how much is this going to cost? We spent a week in Paris and that was like $8,000. We can't afford
Yeah.
4 weeks.
Yeah.
4 weeks might be $8,000. Like if 4 weeks might be more affordable than the 1 week you spent.
Yeah. Guilty, guilty. This is one of those deals, and for those of you listening on the podcast, I held up my little miniature Eiffel Tower. But when the kids were in college, I think my youngest was maybe still in high school. We took a trip to Paris and London. It was like over the holiday break,
Yeah.
when it was cold, but we split our time between the two, and it was one of those trips that I had wished while I was there. I said, 10 years ago, I wish I would have taken this trip with the kids when they were
Mm,
younger. And,
yeah.
and that window of opportunity, I could have done it financially. But
Yeah.
what I didn't really weigh in the thought process is how it would have impacted them as 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, learning
Mm,
history and learning
yeah.
about these countries more so than, when we went back to the Airbnb at night, my kids would all go out. I mean,
Yeah.
our day was over, but their day
Yeah.
was half over.
Yeah.
So they learned how to navigate the subways and
Yeah.
go to different places and met up with friends. I mean, it was I thought it was a great trip, but it was a trip that was different with young adults than it would have
Yes.
been with younger kids or teenagers, or when they still are excited about the things that you want them to be excited about, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
it's
the,
one of
the
the beautiful things about mini retirements is that yeah, I hear so many people like, "Well, I'm just gonna save that for when I'm 65, and I'll just do all those things then." But there are some seasons in life that you don't get a do-over on. Like, if you
yeah,
miss the moment, it's gone. It's passed you by. And when your kids are elementary school age, it's such a vibe. And when they're in high school, like that's such a vibe. And then young
yeah.
adults, like all three of those are wonderful ages, but they're very different. And if
I,
you miss the elementary school or the, middle school age, it's still wonderful to travel with a 25-year-old, but it's not the same. You don't get to
it's
like
different.
redo them being 6.
That's right. That's right. You mentioned windows, and I often talk about this, but um, windows of opportunity kind of open and shut in life,
Yeah.
and sometimes I find that you don't even realize it was a window until it's closed, and then you
Yeah.
realize that was a potential thing I could have done.
Yeah.
And now that opportunity has passed me by, and it may or
Mhm.
may not ever show up again. But it's kind of like the same in your career with job opportunities or different things where someone calls you in and you don't really know what all's going on behind the scenes. But in one of my jobs, I got called in by the corporate controller, and he kind of said, "Hey, I want to work out a new role, an assistant corporate controller role." Well, I didn't know he was retiring in 2.5 years, and
Yeah.
he was going to put me in a position where I could be a successor potentially.
Yeah.
Didn't even cross my mind. I thought corporate, corporate reporting, corporate controller, that kind of stuff. I've been operational for so long. I mean, it was starting to not appeal to me, and I just didn't think about the bigger scheme that might have been at
Mm.
play. And you
Yeah.
just don't know what a window even looks like sometimes when it
Yeah.
opens and shuts, and you realize later that was an opportunity.
Yeah. And I encourage people to try to think through, kind of those preferences, those seasons of life. Like maybe right now, you and your parents could hike through Ireland. Maybe you could take a month and hike through them. Maybe your parents 60 and you're like, or 70, and you're like, yeah, they've got it in them now.
Yeah.
If I wait 10 years, maybe not. Like, or maybe
Right,
my kids would
right.
want to do this trip with me now, but if I wait until they're in the throes of their career and their
They've
families,
got
like
kids. Yeah.
they're not going to be able to take this trip with me. I was chatting with someone who, um, his daughter just finished high school and is getting ready to go to college, and they just spent, I think, 2 months traveling through Europe together and had this amazing adventure. And I was just like, that's so amazing and that's so lovely. Because if you wait 10 years, when she's 30 or 28, like she probably won't have 2 months to do that, with her dad. And so seizing those opportunities that you like, I know this window might be closing.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our listeners, and a friend of mine as well, Carrie, is over in Scotland or somewhere over there with her son who is
Mhm.
30-ish, and they're on a couple-week long hike,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's still things they like to do together, but she
Yeah.
has seized that opportunity. She kind of stepped
Mhm.
away from some of uh, her personal business to take a break
Yeah.
and make it happen. And I had two other things since you mentioned that. Some things don't come again. Like the
Mhm.
Olympics. If you have a goal to go to the Olympics and spend 3 weeks there, beginning to end, you know that's a great mini retirement opportunity for
Yeah.
you take a month off, you got a little ramp up, you got a little ramp down at the end,
Mhm.
and you see whatever you want to see. If
Yeah.
it's winter or if it's summer, whatever it is, those kind of come around ever so often, and they're special events. And the other one you mentioned, I've got senior parents, caring for
Mhm.
senior parents and helping out, maybe an opportunity to do that. And then also special, memory making activities. One of my younger brothers, I've got three brothers and two of them are twins, but one of my younger brothers put together an offshore fishing trip, and we took dad
Yeah.
out, and dad profoundly says while we're out there on the boat, this might be another one of my lasts.
Yeah.
This is one of many last times I'll do something. He's 87. Mom and dad are both 87, and so
Yeah.
yeah, they're physically slowed down, and the kind of things they can do. That world shrinks a little bit
Mhm.
when you get to that point. Um,
Yeah.
Okay, let's move into the sabbatical stuff. I
Yeah.
want to. We could go for 2 hours. And we might go a little longer than we planned here if you're flexible. But I want to talk a little bit about the sabbatical. This is kind of one of the things where I kind of felt like this fits a lot of people if they just need
Mhm.
a break, and if they
Yeah.
like their organization. And there were different types of ways you can come back, maybe come back in your
Mhm.
current role or come back in a different role, or that kind of stuff. But can you talk a little bit? Well, say this is an idea somebody wants to pursue. How would they begin to approach it and communicate their intention? What kind of steps? Because you give some great
Yeah.
examples, even some
Yeah.
scripts and some emails in
Yeah.
the book that could easily be modified with a lot of people's
Yeah.
jobs. So can you talk a little bit about that? How do you kind of open the can of
Yeah, so
worms?
there's basically three ways to go about getting a mini retirement. You can negotiate it off from your current employer. You can separate from your employer and then either to come back to the current employer or go find a different job. Or sometimes something unexpected happens. You know, life throws you a curveball and all of a sudden you don't have to go into work that Monday. And that stuff happens too.
Yeah, yeah,
So when we talk about, I always encourage people like, if you like your job, if you're happy, if you want to stay there, try negotiating it off. And 95% of people say, oh my gosh, I could never do that at my job. Like, we don't have a sabbatical program. Nobody does this. I've never seen anyone do this. Like, this would be such an outlier. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. You can still try because the success rate is pretty high if you put in some of the effort, some of the preparation. Like, you cannot just go into your boss and be like, hey, so peace out. I need a month off. That's your problem to sort out. Like, it won't work.
yeah,
But you
yeah.
have to do that work on the front end. Um, so I always encourage people to start with the mini retirement story. What's the narrative that you're going to craft about what this mini retirement is, what it means, why it's important? And there are four elements that, if possible, to try to include. One we've kind of touched on, but the first one is that it's positive. Um, Even if you're burned out, do not be like, I cannot look at y'all's faces for another month. Like, I need a break. You people are driving me crazy. Like, don't make it negative. Make it positive. The second one, make it something interesting. Like, do something interesting with your time off. The third one, and this isn't always intuitive, but make it specific. It's much easier for us to connect and to be like emotionally invested in specific things versus unspecific. So that might be like, yeah, I want more time with my parents in general versus I'm going to do this 3 week hiking trip through Scotland with them. Like that's a specific way you're spending time with your parents or a
Right.
specific way you're spending time with your adult children. And then the fourth one, kind of like you touched on, make it a one time event.
Sorry, Bella,
No
saw a
problem.
delivery guy.
So the fourth one, make it a one-time event. So, like the Olympics in a specific place, if you want to train for a triathlon in Hawaii for your 50th birthday. I was being interviewed by someone who said that right before him and his wife had kids, he actually did this. He requested a month off for them to backpack through Asia before they decided to start a family. And his boss gave him a month off. And so if you make it seem like hiking the Camino, a one-time event, going to see Machu Picchu, typically a one-time event. So it's not something like that you would necessarily do all of the time. And these four things, these aren't like HR handbook. It's not like, well, if it's positive and interesting and specific in a one time event, then HR says yes. These are more psychology things. You're reducing the risk for your employer and making this more something that they connect with and feels less risky to them. So you start with kind of that story. And then the second half of what you have to do before you have this conversation is think through all the logistical problems that you being gone is going to create and develop the solutions for those problems. And one thing that's not intuitive to a lot of people, I think in human nature, like we want to hide the problems or diminish the problems. Instead, I encourage people, whatever problem your boss is thinking, it's your job to articulate that problem. Don't put it on them to state the
Yeah,
problems after you tell them the little story of
yeah.
like, hey, my mom and my dad, they'd always planned to like bike through Croatia when they turned 60 and they retired. Um, my mom's turning 60 this year. Maybe my dad passed away a few years ago. I would love to be able to do this bike trip with her. I would love to be able to accomplish this goal and this dream, and it would be really meaningful for us, like while my mom's still young enough.
Very
I have a,
time sensitive, right?
yep,
It's a specific event.
yep.
Yeah.
And obviously a one-time event. Like you're not going to hike
Yeah,
Croatia with your mom every year.
I really want to do this.
Yeah.
You as a human can hear my
Yes.
compassion as I tell
Yes.
you, I want to spend some time with my mom. My dad's passed on. I still
Mhm.
want to make this experience happen for her. And so you bring that, and I like, I don't want to diminish what you said a little bit earlier. Remember, you're the one creating this chaos for your company. You
Yes.
need to bring a solution,
Yep.
and not say, I'm going to be gone for a while and I hope
Mm-mm.
I can have a job when I get back,
No, because
No.
yeah, your boss's plate is full. They have their own job. They're busy taking care of their
They're
own stuff.
just
Like
surviving and now
you
you're
can't add more
leaving.
stuff to their plate. So
Yeah.
after you tell that story, you articulate the concerns they might have because they like that story. They're like, that sounds awesome. I mean, I'm emotionally invested in you doing that cool thing, but they have concerns. So you say, I know you might be concerned about XYZ. I know we have this big meeting coming up. I know that we have like this client that needs to be handled, and I've been that point person. So I've come up with some solutions. Here's how I think that this could happen. And then you bring that solutions, and it really starts that collaborative and creative process of figuring this out together.
Right, right. So you don't just bring the issue, you bring a solution. And
Yes.
hey, there are a lot of things we don't know how we're going to do, but I want to work with you and get there because
Hmm.
this is really important for me. I want to
Yeah.
make it. I used to work in a corporate role, but you could call it compliance related. It was
Yeah.
Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, but there were certain things we had to document, and
Yep.
my goal was to make it as easy as possible for the people actually making the product that made money to
Hmm.
comply with what we had to do legally and to
Yeah.
meet all the accounting requirements. So, meeting that with the minimal disruption was
Yeah.
my goal. And this is kind of what
Yeah.
you want to do in this sit down with your boss. It's like, I've looked at all the things we have going for the next 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks
Yeah.
or 6 months, depending on what you're asking for. And and in the course of that, here's the suggestions I have for how we can address these. I need
Hmm.
some help on these two because, well, operating plan where I usually do these things, and I'm not sure who would do those. If you could give me some ideas,
Yeah.
work together to get to the finish line.
Yeah. And I encourage people not necessarily during the first conversation, and this is probably going to take a couple conversations. And typically, I suggest start this conversation about 3 to 4 months before you want to go do the thing. If you start it too early, unless you know industry specific, I really need to start it a year early. But if you start it too early, like a year early, they just are like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not actually going to think about that because it's not urgent
Yeah,
enough. Like,
it's
and they'll
not
just
coming.
forget.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I,
so it becomes
my
a non
horizon
priority.
is only this far
Yes.
out.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
um,
So
you
about 3 to
know,
4 months out.
yeah,
But as you go through the conversations, also think about is there an unsolvable problem in this? Is there one thing we can't figure out? Like you've been the one point of contact for this one client and like this is going to be, ideally pick an ideal time, but are there compromises that you can make that wouldn't diminish your mini retirement, but would fix those one or two unsolvable problems? Like they've only ever talked to you and they hate everyone else at the company. Like, would you be
yeah,
like, you know what? Friday mornings for 90 minutes, I would be available to have that
yeah,
check-in meeting. Like I could still fulfill this role and it wouldn't take away from my mini retirement. But I say don't do that in the first conversation. You don't want to start there.
yeah,
Wait until you've sussed some things out. Conversation 2 or 3, then you can start bringing the like, okay, we've narrowed
yeah.
it down to the one or two things we honestly cannot figure out without me.
Right.
And here's the compromise that I'll make for that.
Excellent. Well, I don't want to go too deep in it, but I think it bears saying it's, you know, accommodating a mini retirement versus, look, I'm done with you. If you want to take some time off,
Hmm.
I'm just going to hire somebody else.
Yeah.
Where you can begin to look at the two biggest issues, which are economics and the time. The plain economics of what it's going to cost you to hire a replacement.
Yep.
And how many times have you seen a replacement get hired for less money than you're paying the incumbent?
Mhm.
Never. Okay, never.
Yeah.
It's always more money,
Yep.
and the ramp up time.
Yep.
I've been in this role for a number of years, or I've been in this organization in many roles for a number of years, and I have got some intangible knowledge
Mhm.
of not only what I do every month, but what all the people are doing around me that I can be
Yep.
proactive in making sure we all work together smooth. that guy is not going to be your new hire. I don't care what he's
Nope.
doing at in their company. If it's the same responsibilities, it's different there. And so many times when you start adding them up, I think you give an example in the book. It's like a number of months to get ramped up and a number of months. And it's like sometimes you're in a job 2 years late and you're
Yeah.
still learning new things.
Yeah. I used an example in the book of a real conversation I had. I was speaking at an event about mini retirements, and someone raised their hand. They're like, I desperately need a month off. I just need a month off. I'm so burned out. But I'm too important. I'm too
Yeah,
important to
yeah,
leave.
yeah,
And I think this is a big concern. People are either like, I'm too poor to do this, or I'm too important. It's like one end of the spectrum or the other. They either have the $5,000, but they can't get the month off, or they don't have the $5,000, but they could get the time
yeah,
off.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, because he was like, he was some sort of executive. So he was like, there's literally no one else who does my job. Literally no one else
Right.
knows how to do any part of my job. And I was like, okay, cool. So if you left, how long would it take to find a replacement for that kind of job? And he's like, yeah, it's a long process. It takes like 6 months. And I'm like, uh-huh, cool, cool, cool. So how long would it take for that person to like get up to speed? Because you've been at this company for like 10 years. It's like, yeah, that's a long process. I mean, at least 6 months. And I'm like, okay, cool, cool, cool. So they could either give you a month off, or they could spend 12 months with this role vacant or underperforming. Your job is to present my mini retirement is the easiest, cheapest, simplest solution. Like this is going to be and you can I give some examples in the book. You can real lightly sprinkle this in because if anyone has taken a single HR class, they know the cost. Like you don't have to be
Oh yeah.
heavy-handed. They are
This
fully
is
aware.
it's not rocket science. Every
No.
company knows this.
And so I kind of
Yeah.
suggest like a good news, bad news, good news sandwich, a real classic of
Yeah.
like, gosh, I love working here so much. And I'm excited about the projects. I'm excited about kind of this trajectory. I would hate to give up my position here to go do this thing that's really important because I am so excited about the people that we're developing and the things we've got going. So if there's any way that we could figure this out, I would be really happy. Like it doesn't have to be super heavy-handed. You can just sprinkle in, I would hate to leave. I love this place so much. Like, but it kind of because that changes the equation. It's not a threat. It's they're choosing now between two things. Do they accommodate this mini retirement or do they have to replace you? And then you just have to make accommodating easier, cheaper, and simpler than replacing you. So you definitely still have to do that work. But if you're willing to leave, that changes the choice equation that they're making.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're absolutely, I hope we can work this out, but
Yeah.
I'm going to take this trip,
Yeah.
and if there's a bigger gap and margin between the economics and, and the time and all that, they realize, okay, a month is just a month. I mean, and,
Yeah.
and you make a comment somewhere in the book. It's like people have maternity leave policies or family leave policies. People
Yeah.
leave all the time for six
Yes.
weeks. Okay. It
Yes.
happens all the time. And
Yeah.
guess what? They come back and everybody's back to normal. And while
Yeah.
they're out, we had, I say back when I worked in the medical device business for Walt, the guy with the list, um, we all, as reports to him, he reorganized the finance department and basically maybe one person didn't change roles, but almost all of us changed roles. And one guy was given an opportunity to take a diminished role or leave, and he
Mm.
chose to leave. Um, but we all were responsible for training our successor in our job because we just left a
Mhm.
job, and
Yeah.
and so there was an accountability across the whole team to make your successor successful, and
Yeah.
there was this benefit of cross training where when
Yes.
someone has a surprise and they're gone for 6 weeks,
Hmm.
somebody knows how to do their job, at least the
Yeah.
critical parts of it. Because
Yeah.
let's be honest, there's a lot of little things that they can wait 6 weeks. But the
Yeah.
big stuff, When
Yeah.
you're in a financial role, you got month end, you got quarter end, you got an
Yeah.
operating plan, you got a strategic plan. It just keeps coming. It's like a machine.
Yeah.
The calendar is not your friend.
Yeah.
And when those deadlines happen, you got to have numbers. You got to have flash revenue numbers in 2 days. You got to have
Mhm.
a flash P&L in 5 days. All these things require a lot of effort and infrastructure and systems and
Mhm.
whatever, but knowledge
Yeah.
and having that cross training. You know, it the other thing you said, state the obvious. Your boss may not know all the things you do. And
Mhm.
and when you're going through these discussions and you think about what you do every day or every week or every month and you actually write them on paper, you
Mhm.
know it, but he
Yeah.
may not know it or she may not
Yeah.
know it. I
Yep.
mean, because you're taking care of it.
Yep.
That's why you're such a great employee. I guess it goes without saying that if you're going to ask for this kind of concession from your employer, you probably need to be a performer.
Yeah.
You need to be doing your share of work, and you have brownie points in the jar, as I like to say, before you ask to use some of those brownies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's that is one of the benefits, and it's one of the benefits you can kind of pitch. I have a chapter in the book I talk about what would be the benefits to a company of having every employee take a month off every year. Um, and it's the same benefits of just you taking a month off
Right,
in that
right.
you have to share that industry knowledge. You have to do cross training because if you legitimately are the only person who knows how to do this job, what happens if you get hit by a bus? What happens if you have to go through cancer treatments and you have no time to prepare? Then you have a really fragile system. There's a lot of benefits of of you stepping out, even in succession training. You mentioned um, this person might retire in 2.5 years. Well, if they would have taken a mini retirement and they could have tested a few different people stepping into the role, you get a much better picture of who's going to be successful in this role, who's really going to thrive and be able to do this because making that promotion is a big commitment. But if you've been able to test drive it a couple times, you have a much
Yeah.
clearer idea of who should be promoted.
I love that because succession planning is a big deal,
Hmm.
particularly at the upper levels in these different management roles.
Yeah.
And when you can kind of designate somebody to cover that role while someone's out, you do get a chance to see them. They show up at the staff meetings, they make their presentations.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I've never seen him in this mode. He's really
Yes.
good, or he probably needs to work on a few things, but I can
Yep.
see him coming. Um, I love that benefit. There's a lot of benefits to the
Yeah.
company and to the individual in this. This is what you call your "Call Me Crazy" chapter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And let's go on and talk more about that because I
Mhm.
think there are a lot of benefits to the company.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the crazy things about that is that sometimes we have this nervousness of, well, I don't want other people to have to cover for me. I don't want other people to have to carry my work. But the reality is, if there's people who want to be promoted into
That
your
are
role. So you're
hungry.
you're you're
Yes.
picking people who maybe are one level below you. They want the opportunity to not just help out, but to step in and not just show off how capable they are and how skillful and knowledgeable, but to see, like you said, what are the weak spots? Because when you're doing an employee development plan, um, but you have real data. Like we saw you do this job for a month and here's where you were awesome. And here's the 3 or 4 things that if we worked on this, you're ready for that job. Like you're ready
Yeah.
to go to the next level. There's a lot of people that are excited for that opportunity. And honestly, that's what makes employee engagement and employee satisfaction so high is if they have the ability to learn new skills and not just test one job. If everyone's taking a mini retirement, in the course of a year or 2 years, they might be able to step into 2 or 3 different roles because sometimes we don't always know where we want to get promoted to. We need to
Right.
test that out and try and actually oh, I loved that. Like that was amazing. I would thrive in that. The company knows you would thrive, but you know that that would be a great position for you.
Yeah, I keep mentioning Walt's stories, but as he was a good mentor of mine, he's passed away, but he was very much structured on you need to do this, this, and this, and this, and then you'll be ready to be a VP
Yep.
or whatever.
Yep.
But he actively was working on your breadth of experience to kind of build that in each of his people. Uh, and ultimately, I benefited tremendously in my
Yeah.
career with that resume experience. Um, when I did leave, and I was able to find a job, a small company, a little biotech company, but a VP and a job. And I remember going to a board meeting. I flew to a board meeting in Dallas, and on the way home from the airport in the car, I called Walt to thank him. And why was I thanking my old boss? It was so tough on me. He could squeeze anything out of me. But I said, Walt, I said, one of the things you just did all the time that drove us crazy is you over prepared for all these meetings. And we had back when you made slides on a transparency and you put them on an overhead projector,
Yeah.
we would go through iteration after iteration after iteration with him. And I found myself over preparing for that board meeting at the
Mm.
small biotech where I'm sitting in a room with mostly investors and PhD scientists and things. And they're, they want to feel confidence when their financial guy gets up and talks about the numbers and the funding and the spending.
Yep.
And over preparing, you know, never let me down. Now, granted, I
Yeah.
burned a few hours, but I never was disappointed, that I wasn't prepared, and it was a skill. But he was really good about moving you into different roles, and I think from a company perspective, getting a view of different people and different responsibilities, you can
Mm.
see behaviors that are different and competencies that you didn't even know they had. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, this guy is he's a great presenter. He
Yep.
distills all this complicated stuff down and we understand it. And we know that he knows it because if he knows it, I'm not worried because guess what? We're all standing on somebody else's shoulders. And if
Yeah.
those shoulders are solid, I'm all for this guy learning more,
Hmm.
and taking responsibility. Um, okay. I think we could talk a lot about the different things on benefits to a company for giving
Hmm.
these amounts of time off. I experienced my son-in-law when my grandson was born having time off, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, we baby Jessica, my oldest, was born on a Friday. No, I'm sorry, on a Saturday morning afternoon. I get this wrong. I'm bad. Um, and so I was out all weekend for the weekend,
Hmm.
and I took Monday off, and I was back at the office on Tuesday. My mother-in-law was at the house, and this is the way it
Mm.
was. It's
Yeah.
not like that anymore.
Yeah.
It's completely different, and and that expectation that people are going to be out is
Yeah.
normal. It's
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. And, you talked about how things are shifting. That is one way. So, companies, when I encourage people to negotiate time off, start with a month, but in that 1 to 3 months, because on an HR perspective, they're set up of how to logistically navigate someone being gone for 3 months. In almost every company, they have that framework of like, here's the forms we fill out and here's the buttons we push on the
Right,
computer.
right.
Um, but they are used to people leaving for periods of time. And how do we prepare for that? Whether it's a planned leave, like a baby's coming,
Yeah.
or an unplanned, like, oh, shoot, got stage 4 cancer, got to go do a bunch of chemo
Got it.
treatments.
Yeah, got to get the treatment.
Um, and so that amount of time, I know people are like, oh, it could never happen in my company. People do take leave, like, and we figure it out, and it makes you better, but I think it makes everyone on the team better as well.
Well, I just want to touch on a couple more topic areas before we
Yeah.
wrap up because, man, we're almost halfway through, and we're 98% through the time allotment. But uh,
I
let's
pack a
talk a
lot of
little.
stuff into this book.
Yeah, it is filled with material, and I really encourage everyone to pick a copy of this book up because there is something you can learn. Even as an early retiree, I picked up a lot of things in this book that I said, even as a retiree, I feel
Yeah.
like many retirements is still a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
My wife and I are plugged into different activities and things that we
Yep.
do. And for us to plan, like I'll be up in Portland. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a getaway for us, and you can get excited about phases of your
Yeah.
retirement, like these mini retirements. Okay.
Yeah.
And, you kind of chart out a plan. But let's
Hmm.
talk about the mini retirement go bag because
Yeah.
there are three things that you need in your mini retirement go bag. And, I'm going to ask you, are all three of these required? And I think the obvious answer is probably yes. But, one of the things I say over and over and over to my kids is having some cash gives you
Yeah.
options.
Hmm.
There's a term in the financial community, financial independence community of FU money. It's like if
Hmm.
I decide I just want to leave and go somewhere else, I've got
Yeah.
some cash and I can bridge that gap. And I saw my daughter actually do this, and she left a career in Houston and moved here to College Station.
Yeah.
She had the ability to do that. And my son came home on Mother's Day weekend and said, "Hey, mom and dad, I want to quit my job. I want to be a teacher. I'm going to get certified, and this is my plan."
Yeah.
It's like, go out. He's a
Yeah.
teacher today, 5 years into this,
Yeah.
seventh grade science teacher. And, and you talk actually, I don't want to do this tangent, but I am anyway, about school teachers. By the end of the school year, they're spent.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
done. Okay.
Crispy.
And and they are crisp fried. And
Yeah.
so they have this time in the summer to kind of recharge and reset their bearings and kind of
Yeah.
think through a lot of the things that, teaching, he was up and he drank his coffee and was out the door early and every day. That class
Yeah.
day happens on a schedule. Um,
Yeah.
but they needed that recharge block every year.
Yeah.
And he helped me actually build the treehouse after he finished one school year. Um, so the three things in your go bag, cash is one of them.
Yep.
Having a plan is
Hmm.
another one,
Hmm.
and then having the confidence to
Yeah.
execute.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about the go bag.
Yeah, this is kind of based on the idea that sometimes a mini retirement's a little unexpected. Like you didn't plan it 2 years in advance. Life opened up an opportunity, whether you wanted to move across country or switch careers, or you get laid off, or you have a baby, or something happens and you might be unemployed for a minute. Um, and you can really lean into that and take advantage of that. So definitely having a little cash. And I think about it kind of like the opposite of an emergency fund is kind of an opportunity fund. If an opportunity arises, you can lean in and say yes. Like
You're
you can,
planning to spend this money, right?
yes. Yeah. And so you don't have to I don't like the idea of emergency because we can always talk ourselves out. Well, this isn't an emergency. This isn't an emergency. But you might be like, this is an opportunity.
Well,
um,
and to be fair, when you have an unexpected expected surprise and you're unemployed, what is the natural tendency? I can't spend money. I don't have a
yes.
paycheck. It
Yep.
is, I can't, instead of hot dog, look what I
Yeah.
can do now.
Yep.
And no one thinks like that, but
Yeah.
that is real. You can leverage it and make it a positive experience, right?
Which is why it's important to come up with a few plans. Like think through, use that chapter one, come up with a bucket list of, 3, 5, 20 different ideas, things that you could do in a month, things that you could do at home or traveling or in winter or in summer, in different depending when the opportunity arose and different budgets. Some of them could be $1,000, some of them could be $5,000. Um, but if you have those plans, if you have that picture of what this could be, and if you have the cash set aside, those two things help give you the confidence to pivot. Because it is tough when something unexpected happens, or even in a career pivot, you might be burned out and discouraged and tired. And yeah, you want to do something else, but without that vision, without that plan, and without that cash, you're kind of like, I guess I'm stuck.
Yeah.
um, and so you have to have that confidence to be able to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to do this cool thing, especially if the unexpected thing was kind of a bummer. If it was like you got laid off, or maybe a parent got sick and needed care, and now you're going to be taking FMLA for 12 weeks to help them. But, I had a client who was really burned out. And her parent was having Alzheimer's. It was progressing overseas. And so she, kind of doubled up. She took her 12 weeks leave. She went and got her mom set up, figured out the care facility, got everything navigated, but also used some of that time for these other goals and ideas that she had of like, how can I recover from burnout? How can I reconnect with myself? How can I reimagine like the next
Right.
chapter? And came back not only having taken care of her mom and feeling better about, her mom's trajectory, but her in a better spot, her like in a healthier, more energized spot for the next chapter of her career.
Right, right. Well, moving into the next section of the book, you talk about
Yeah.
what is everybody's knowledge is you got to have finances in order to
Mhm.
make these kind of decisions and to take these periods of time away from your primary career and earnings. But it's interesting because some of your own mini retirements, and like half of your mini retirements, you kind of planned, and other half kind of just
Mhm.
happened, right? Life
Yep.
happened. But in some of your mini retirements, you actually did some things that caused you to have income from rental properties, that
Yeah.
that went into the positive impact. But we can't be talking about anything around the world of financial independence without at least stating, and I think it's always good to re-educate everybody that listens. But you know, the steps you provide, the pillars of finance, if you will,
Mhm.
are things that are maybe black and white to some people, but not to others.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read through what these 6 items are real quick,
Yeah.
because I think it's always important for people to know your finances,
Yeah.
understand your situation, because if you don't know and understand, you can't improve. You can't continue to move the right direction.
Mhm.
The first one is tracking expenses.
Mhm.
I completely agree with this, and this is one of the things I wrote a blog post on is kind of these steps in my own words. But if you don't track your expenses, you don't know what you're spending. You don't know how much money is going out the door,
Yeah.
and of course the offset to that is how much is coming in the door because
Mhm.
whatever comes in, if it's going, you can actually spend more than you make, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
possible.
Yep.
A lot of people don't even know they're doing it when they're doing it
Yeah.
because they've got credit cards and things like that. The next one is to spend more intentionally, and I think this
Mhm.
probably flows out of that tracking expenses because if you're not
Mhm.
tracking them, you might discover some things, right?
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
And then the next one is budgeting and creating financial plans.
Mhm.
Um, and people budget different levels of detail, but just kind of having a guideline of what do we plan to spend every month? That's a
Mhm.
start. I mean, it doesn't have to be, I'm going to spend, $12 on entertainment and $45 on eating out the one time I can afford to eat out or whatever. That's great. But if you start somewhere, it's better than not doing a budget, right?
Yeah.
And then this is something I say over and over and over in the podcast, but growing the gap.
Mhm.
I look down in London at the subway and there's a sign at your feet that says "Mind the gap."
Yep.
Always mind the gap. The gap is the gap between what you bring home and what you spend.
Mhm.
And if you pay attention to that gap and actually grow that gap,
Mhm.
that's that's some money that fuels two big things in our discussion here today: many retirements and financial independence.
Yep.
Both things that the bigger the gap is, the quicker you can fill those buckets. Um, and then guarding the gap, where you kind of
Yep.
talk about investing, building new income, rental property income, business income, things like that. And then the final one is financial empowerment.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm such a money nerd, and I've always loved it, and I've worked and written in the financial independence space for a long time. So it's like a lot of other money nerds.
Yeah,
And so
right.
this stuff feels interesting and exciting and like delicious to a lot of
Yeah,
us,
yeah.
But the reality is, for other people, for some other people, this is like the worst. They hate all of it so much. But my hope is that mini retirements, they are kind of the carrot to that stick. Like you might not have the motivation or inspiration to like track your expenses or to figure out how to grow your gap or figure out how the heck do we guard that gap and like put it someplace useful. And you might start to feel like money just happens to me. My financial life is happening to me, and I'm playing defense all the time, trying not to lose this game. But a mini retirement is a great opportunity to to lean in a little bit, to track our expenses, to make a financial plan, to grow that gap a little bit. And then you take this mini retirement, and it's this moment of, oh, I can happen to my money. I can make things happen financially. Like I have more autonomy and power over this than I realized. And I hope for the non-money nerds. And so if you have like non-money nerds in your family, in your friend group, you know, maybe you have adult kids like yourself
Yeah.
that maybe they love it or maybe they're like whatever. Like your interest is so weird. Like this is an idea that gives a really tangible result. Like if you're like quote unquote good with money, it can massively improve your life. And they might not care about the good with money. They might just be interested in the massively improve your life part.
Yes, the
But
options that are enabled by being money aware.
yes.
Yes.
Yes. So this is like, I love mini retirements of like, if you want to get someone who doesn't care about their finances at all to care about it and to lean in, a mini retirement, I think, might be one of the best tools to do it because it is so, it's not just like a new car. It's magical. It's something you remember for the rest of your life, a highlight of your life, and it's transformative. Like you change in the process. And so it gives people that motivation to come back and to make much bigger money moves. Like that was so amazing. I want to do this again. So like all of those steps that I skipped, like I'm going to double down. I'm really going to like I did the easy things. Now I want to do the harder things.
Right, right. You know, I feel like the money thing and compounding, we could talk about these money things forever, but as a retiree, personally, I experienced the great stock market we've had and
Yeah.
having money invested in the stock market. And and you know, I've gotten a little more conservative because I've got that timeline in front of me now, and you know that you don't want the money to not outlast you, but just the same, you want to live a life of deprivation when you're capable of enjoying it and
Yeah.
using it and spending it
Yeah.
with those around you and your friends and your family and saying yes. You know, we saw something come up. Leanne Morgan, we're going to go to Dallas and we're going to go see her
Mm,
this weekend.
nice.
You know,
Yeah.
but you know, when opportunities show up, don't even think twice. Just do it.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
do it. Um, you know, I want to move us toward wrapping up because we are running over a little bit, and I don't want to leave out the fact that you cover many more things in this book. You talk a little bit about these five buckets and investing and building businesses and paying off debt and rentals and house hacking. There's a lot of great content in here. We're not going to get to go to today. You talk about healthcare. One of the things that's an unknown for a lot of people that maybe take time off or retire early is, there's obvious things like Cobra and things like that, but there's also the Affordable Care Act and these
Mhm.
plans that really are not that expensive that have really good coverage. And so, and even credits depending on your income level. So
Yep.
don't let the things that you don't know about stop you from realizing you can still take time off.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
there are solutions, right? And you
Yeah.
give nine of them just for healthcare alone. So
Yeah.
I'm going to just say in the book, there's a lot of great answers to these questions you might have that we're not going to talk about today, but there is information in the book. And I want to hit on this one thing at the end of the book. When you're stuck at a six, this is
Mm,
a 6 out of 10, right? Where
yeah.
how do you feel about doing something? And,
Mhm.
I know that I probably was a little too conservative in this perspective in my career. And there were opportunities where, maybe I was not willing to feel that uncomfortable and to take some of these risks or opportunities. But I can say that personally, when we were at a three for too long, that
Yeah.
forced change.
Yep.
Okay. And so when you get kind of below the middle point and you start
Yeah.
to drift down and you say, I don't see this getting a lot better,
Yeah.
it's time for a change. It's time for a change. And that got us to College Station, Texas, got us out of Houston, and got us on a whole new trajectory and an environment. And just realized that taking these opportunities can really lead to discovering things that you didn't even have in your mind, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things like just with human nature, it's really easy for us to imagine ways things can potentially go wrong because the ways they potentially go wrong can feel I don't know, really uniform, like really predictable. It's really tough to imagine the ways things can go right because the ways they go right feel incredibly random. They feel like there's nothing you could have ever even expected. Like, we might be on this road trip and we might drive through this town and we might realize we love this town and then we might meet someone that like has an amazing job opportunity. We might end up moving to this town. Like 2 years before that, you would never be like, that might happen because it feels so random. But the reality is when you create space in your life, you create space for these random, amazing things that you never saw coming. People you never expected to meet, opportunities you never expected to see, new jobs that you might end up getting that you didn't even know about that company a year ago, and now like you're going to get a significant raise because they're hiring you. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's really easy to kind of like to be like, well, but what if these bad things happen? And weigh those really heavily in our mind and not weigh heavily, what if good stuff happens? Like it creates space for the possibility of life-changing things.
You know, ironic that you bring that up as a final point because the last bullet point on my page, and as a career guy in finance and different internal audit and corporate controller roles and different things, often we were trying to figure out what can go wrong,
Yep.
not what could go right. What could go
Hmm.
wrong and how do we prevent it from happening? Okay. But I want to 100% echo what you said because remember, what can go right? A lot of
Yeah.
things can go right. A lot of things can happen that you don't know. And a lot, if you take the plunge into mini retirement, you might discover things are going right that you didn't even see coming. It's like
Hmm.
someone hears that you're no longer working there, and this
Hmm.
client says, "You're kidding me, they're available." They
Yep.
call you, and you're just like, "I've got an interview lined up," you know?
Yep.
And my friend Mark, he travels all over the place now. He's retired, but when we hired him at our company, Walt, the same guy I told the stories about, he had he had been in an oil and gas company, and you know that cycle in Houston, I'm sure up
Hmm.
there as well. There's some oil and gas activity.
Hmm.
It's feast or famine, right?
Yep.
And his company had been bought, and they were winding down. And I'll never forget this. Mark was not ready to start because he was on the Seychelles. He was on these
Mm.
islands out
Yeah.
in the middle of the ocean.
Yep.
And it's like, what do you mean? This guy didn't have a job and he's out on the Seychelles?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. He sees the opportunity. And to
Yeah.
this day, he's a role model. You know,
Mm.
he was all over the Pacific, retracing his dad, drew
Mm.
Marmaduke, and he's passed away. But now Mark's brother draws Marmaduke, the comic, right?
Oh my
And
gosh.
Mark went and retraced all the places his dad went in the Navy in World War II. These little
That's
islands,
incredible.
and you just opportunities can come,
Yeah.
but also career and personal development
Hmm.
and relationships. And you realize when you're on a mini retirement and you're spending 24/7 with your partner, it's like you
Hmm.
discover a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Surprises, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of things can happen on these mini retirements. Some are challenging and some are great and some are experiences you'll never forget. And so with that, let's wrap it up with Jillian. Jillian, tell us what's coming up. What's your near-term plan look like, and how do you feel about the book rolling out next week?
Yeah, super exciting. Like I said, I've been I've been working on this book for 3 years, and writing online for a decade now. So, I mean, I'm basically an overnight success. It's only taken a
Oh,
decade.
yeah,
Um,
just it's a slow night. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm so excited to see people who like the idea, because most people like the idea. They're like, oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, I could use a month off. But then they have all these questions and all of this doubt and all of these concerns. And the book, while I think it's very positive, it's very upbeat, but it really, if you kind of step back and think about it, I'm just going through one by one every single concern someone could ever have. Like, how do I send this email to my boss? How would I budget for
Right.
this? How much would this cost me? How would this affect my retirement savings? And I'm neutralizing every fear or concern. Not that you won't feel any fear, it'll still be a little scary because it's exciting and it's big and it's different, but it'll feel manageable. Like I'm trying to get you to a
Yeah.
manageable amount of fear to where you can take the leap. And I think the thing I'm most excited about, because it's what I love about my work now, is people send me emails. People message me on Instagram. I get DMs of like, "Hey, I went and did the thing. I I heard you speak, or I heard you on this
Yeah.
podcast, and we planned it and it was amazing and all of these cool things happened, and yeah, I was a little bit scared, but you were right. Like it was actually way easier to negotiate off than I thought, and it was cool and they were really supportive." Um and so that to me is exciting, and I'm hoping that we can create, if you've ever heard of like the like technology like adapter curve, you have like super early adapters, then you have kind of like the moderately early adapters. I think in the fire movement, we've got like the super early adapters. We're the ones who are like,
Yeah.
this is untested and unproven, and we're totally doing it anyways. Like we like the math, we're all in.
Yeah. Mr.
But
Money Mustache from way
yeah,
back. It's like I Googled that up and
yeah,
like it never left my mind. It's like,
yeah.
and then it became reality. Yeah.
But I'm hoping with this, if we can create enough of a conversation and enough of a narrative, I think my next chapter, now that like the individual has the book, it's really corporate culture and it's really changing the infrastructure of how we take mini retirements to where, like you mentioned, in Europe or Finland, like
Yeah.
it's built into the system and the system works. So this isn't like a crazy unproven thing. It does work in companies, and I think the companies are going to be better for it, and I think the employees are going to be better for it. And those kind of late adapters that like they would never have taken a mini retirement unless their company like forced it on them, they're going to get one, and it's going to be life-changing for them,
Yeah.
and that is so exciting to me.
In the financial industry, sometimes in banking, they'll
Mhm.
force their employees to take 2 weeks
Yep.
solid off,
Yep.
um, because if there's some funny business going on, a
Mhm.
fraud or anything like that, and they're gone for long enough,
Yep.
somebody's going to stumble on that issue,
Yep.
And so there was literally, I don't know, federal requirement or what, but
Mhm.
certain banking people had to leave. But just making it a culture
Yeah.
of, hey, what are you going to do for your 12, your month off this year? Or
Yes.
when you can put it in the structure of a company, and it doesn't have to be everybody at the same time.
No.
Oh wow, that wouldn't be that hard because
Mhm.
people are cross trained, and quarter end,
Yeah.
we know how to manage around quarter ends. We'll just have a rule that we can't do it at quarter end, okay, in the
Yeah.
finance department or something. But
Yeah.
hey, that's 2 other months every quarter. You could still do it, right?
Yeah.
So many retirements, I think, are not gone. I think they're coming hard, and I think you're going to do
Yeah.
what you can to influence the industry and to get the word out that maybe a different way of thinking about this would be beneficial to your organization
Mhm.
and to the individuals and to all the things that orbit around those relationships, whether it be within the company or within the individual. They're all going to have an opportunity to see things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for spending a lot more than an hour with me here today, and I really wish you luck on this book release next week. Looking forward to meeting you IRL, as they
Yeah.
say,
Next
in
week.
Portland, and
Yeah.
remembering that you were a basketball player. I'm afraid you might be taller than me, but I'm not sure yet. Um,
5'11 and a half.
oh yeah, you're definitely going to be taller than me. So, uh, but We here at the Filighter podcast are privileged to have you on, and looking forward to seeing you. And we really are excited about what mini retirements might mean for
Yeah.
others out there. If you're considering a mini retirement, take the next step, learn
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
This is a great book to read. It goes into a lot of the concerns you might have, and as an apprehensive believer, I'm sold. I would be doing this, okay?
Yep.
And I plan to employ it even in my retirement as an early retiree. There's just a lot of great things about a focused time off that you
Yes.
recharge and you have a purpose,
Yeah.
and you have a goal of what that retirement is going to accomplish, or that
Hmm.
mini retirement is going to accomplish. So those are all positive things, and things that I think are really good opportunities if you can make one happen. So with that, I will say we're signing off here from Montana and Texas at the Filighter Podcast, episode 21. You have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming and appearing. And even though you're 1,700 miles away, it feels like you're right next door. And love to have some tea in the garden with you sometime, and learn more. You guys have a great evening, great day, whatever you're doing today. And remember, grow the gap, mind the gap. This is the Filighter, Lambo signing out.